Weather fronts and cold fronts. Whenever you watch the weather forecast, you always see maps like this and all sorts of symbols on here that represent different things that are different kinds of fronts. But what is a front? Well, our definition of a front is where two air masses collide. So we've talked about air masses, that for a given air mass, it's going to have the same temperature and humidity. So when you have two different kinds of air coming together, you're going to get some form of weather. So we're going to start by talking about a cold front. So first, what is a cold front? Oops, I thought I had a definition. Let's put it on here. So this is cold air moving into warm air. So on our picture here, our cold air is going to be on this side, and it's moving into the warm air. So let's see what happens. Well, typically the shape of our front when it's a cold front is going to be steep. So that's this profile right here. So you see that it rises up relatively quickly when you're dealing with a cold front. And that's because the cold air has a high density, or at least is denser than the warm air. So it basically plows into, not right, basically, the warm air. So it's looking like a bulldozer. So this cold air plows into that warm air, and so it's pushing the warm air forward, but it's also kind of pushing it out of the way. So our warm air is getting pushed up very rapidly because of that steep profile. The warm air is going to move quickly upward. So you've got all this warm air moving upward. It's going to be moist, because typically warm air is going to have some moisture in it, unless you're in the desert. So because you have this rising, warm, moist air, you're going to get clouds. So you're going to get all this condensation taking place as the warm air hits the colder air at higher altitudes. So we're getting all these clouds forming. Typically, if it's a strong enough front, you're going to get a lot of rain. But the rain is going to be isolated to kind of this region of the front, which is fairly narrow. So lots and lots of rain, but if the front is fast moving, it's going to pass very quickly. So you get these very strong storms that might last an hour or so, but then it clears up. You're also going to get a very quick change in temperature. If you're standing over here, it's going to be nice and warm. Standing over here, it's going to be cold. And as this front passes by, you're going to feel that temperature change as the front goes past you. Typically, you also get strong winds because when you have warm air, you've got low pressure. And where you have cold air, you have high pressure. And of course, wind always flows from high to low pressure. So you're going to have very strong winds going across that front. And you're especially going to feel it as you're right smack in the middle of the front. Right at this frontal boundary, right here, exceedingly low pressure. And that's because your air is rising up. And the front is pushing your warm air upward. That's going to create this very strong low pressure system. And usually you kind of feel it if you start feeling kind of drowsy and things when these fronts come by. That's because of the low pressure. If you have a barometer, you will see the barometer pressure graph it's going along nicely, and then suddenly the pressure drops. And so here's your front approaching with that very, very low pressure. So all of these things are associated with a cold front.